Hey everybody, how's it going? So thanks for coming along to this Planet Coaster Top Tips for Realism lesson. This is episode number 12, and this is by popular demand. This week we're talking about block sections and coaster spacing. So it's okay if you don't know what a block section is, because we're going to start there. So for those more experienced players, we're just going to go through the principles of the block break, so please bear with us whilst we talk about this. So here's a coaster that I pulled in from Jippity Point. You would have seen it before, and this one's got multiple block sections. So the idea of a block section is to split your coaster up into multiple smaller sections so that you can have more trains on the track and improve your throughput. Now we're going to talk about timings later on in this video, so let's not worry about that just for now. Now a train is going to leave the station and it's going to travel through the block sections that you've designed. Now these are usually a combination of things like the station, the lift hill or the launch, specifically placed block breaks around the course of the actual coaster, and then some just at the end just before your station. Now, your first train is going to leave the station and it's going to travel through your blocks. Once it's cleared the first section, the second train is then allowed into the block that the first train was originally in. Now, this process continues all the way around the track, but if at any point the train in front takes too long to clear that block section, then the train behind is going to be forced to stop and they then have to wait until the block in front is clear. Now this is where the timing and the spacing comes into it that we're going to talk about later. But coasters with smaller trains tend to have more block breaks, and coasters that have got longer or higher capacity trains tend to have fewer blocks. Now I just need to prepare something off camera, so caller, please bear with me. So let's have a look at this in principle then, using some coasters that I've just pulled into our demo park. This is the Eurofighter from Jippity Point. We would have seen it all before, and this is broken up into multiple sections. So we've got ourselves the station section, that's block number 1. We then have a bit from the end of the station to the top of the lift hill, and that's block number 2. Block number 3 is from the first drop, through the loop, over the airtime hill, to the turnaround, through the 0G, round the twist, and to this one here. And then block 4 is the drop into the Immelman, into the helix, and into the first brake run just before the station. And then the 5th block is between this block break and this block break. So I can get a total of 4 trains on this track, because you always need to have one block clear, because that's just how the maths works out. But for this one, because of timings, I've chosen to do 3. So that means that by the time that this train has finished unloading in Planet Coaster Unloading, this train that's behind it is just approaching the station, and most of the time you get a nice smooth throughput. So watch this one. This is going to leave just as this one is arriving. So in the perfect world, you'd want to time it so that this one is already in this block section before this train has left. But that's probably as close as you're going to get on this kind of layout. So that works quite nicely when it comes to smaller trains. But when you have longer trains, you may not have a need to have such short blocks. So here's just a generic, up to you whether you call it a Vekoma or an arrow. But this one is broken up into block number 1, which is the station, block number 2, which is the first drop and turnaround, and there's a block break here at the bottom of the lift hill. There's then block 3, which is the lift hill, and there's block 4, which is everything from the top of the lift hill through the course to the final brake run. And then this final brake run, because of the length of the train, is only 1. So technically I could get 3 trains, maybe push a 4th onto this track, but the loading and unloading of this coaster would be so inefficient that you wouldn't even need 3 trains. So I've timed this whole coaster that this train is now leaving as this train is arriving. So it's a smooth, constant flow of unloading and offloading of guests. The same applies over here with the Woody, but it's a little bit more elongated. The idea is that you don't want your trains to be waiting too long in your station, and this is a pretty bad example of doing that, because this train, I don't know if you can see it, this train will have been loaded and will be waiting for this train that's already on the track to hit a certain point before it then is allowed to leave. And I'll show you how you can achieve that in a moment. But the principle remains exactly the same. You have a station, which is block 1. Block 2 is the lift hill. Block 3 is then everything around the course to the brake run that sits just underneath here where we built our maintenance shed. And then the next block is just before the station here. So again, I could get 3, maybe 4 trains on here, but because of the loading strategy of this coaster and the way that Planet Coaster deals with loading and unloading, it's most efficient using 2. So the idea of the blocks is to help you have a more efficient coaster layout. The more trains you can get on the track, the more people you can get through, the faster people get through, the shorter your queues, the happier your guests. So, when you're dealing with block sections, you have to be very careful. These ones where they're at the beginning and the end, they're nice and simple, right? So, you just finish your lift hill, you do your track in the middle, your track's short enough that it takes the same amount of time to get from here at the top of the lift hill to here, the first brake run, as it does to load the next train. So in real life, you're going to be looking at loading a train of this kind of thing. You're going to be looking at launching one every 60 seconds or so. But for the Eurofighters, you're probably going to be looking to launch a train every 30 seconds or so. But that doesn't quite pan out in Planet Coaster because of the way that it's coded to deal with the loading and offloading. So we don't have simultaneous loading and offloading of stations, right? So it's you have to sort of play with the game on that one. So let's go ahead and see how we build this in-game. So we're probably all pretty familiar with how to build coasters in Planet Coaster, so this is going to be one that I'm going to take absolutely no care doing whatsoever. But I'm going to choose one at random. It's the Flawless. And I'm going to place the station, and that's our first block. Then I'm going to take it into a lift hill, which we're all familiar with. There we go. I'm just going to cap off the lift hill, and that's officially our second block. So we can still only have one train because 2 blocks is 1 train, but I'm going to bring it then into the first part of the course. So here we go, just with a really rubbishy first drop, and I'm going to then continue the layout until I hit. Oh, I'm going to kill someone with this bend, but I'm going to continue this layout until I hit about 20 seconds after the train has been released from the lift hill. That's your key moment. So 20 seconds after the train has left the lift hill. Now, that's when you need to start considering whether you're going to have a mid-course brake run. So you continue your layout, you time your train to be 20 seconds from leaving this, down the first drop, through the first part of the course, and if you're not close to finishing the coaster, so if you're not already coming around, then you need to start considering whether you're going to have a mid-course brake run. If you're going to, all you need to do is make sure that it's at a high point of the ride, and then you place block brake by choosing this block section here. Now, why a high point of the ride, do I hear you say? Well, if you think back to the introduction when we said that if the train in front hasn't cleared the block, the train behind is brought to a stop. If it's at a low point and it's brought to a stop at the low point, the train is never going to make it round to the rest of your layout. So this is a particularly bad example because this is the low point of the ride. But that's the principle there. So you want to make sure that the block brake that you're putting in halfway around the course is the highest part of your second part of the layout. Does that make sense? That's for the reasons that you don't want the train to stall. And then when you're completely ready and you finish it all, you might do another 20 seconds and think, actually, I'm still not done with my coaster layout. Yeah, I want to carry on doing it. That's absolutely fine. Put another brake run in. There's absolutely no limit to the number of brake runs or launches or whatever you put in the middle. It's completely up to you. You've got free reign over what you design. But when you are ready to finish off your coaster, just make sure that at the end, just before your station, you include at least 1 block section so that you can have stacking. And then if you want to, you can have a gap of a little bit and you can have a second one, just so that you can squeeze the number of trains. Now, the reason that you might put more than 1 here, so more than 1 brake run here, is because you might be running 3 trains. Now, you might want to have the situation where if you have a breakdown, you still want the trains to continue through the course, but you want them to stack up just before the station so that you can evacuate them. You don't want to stop them mid-ride because that just causes absolute nightmares to get people off halfway round. So you might allow the train to continue through the course, and you allow the second train to wait on this brake run, and then the third train to wait on this brake run. Now, I've just used the phrase stacking. What's that all about? So stacking is when you allow the trains to sit and wait for the train in front at the station. So if we go back to our Eurofighter here, we don't really, well, we do at the moment because there's no queue. But when there is a queue and there's a flow of people, you notice that the trains are pretty much leaving just as the train behind is arriving. So that's not a stacking, that's rolling. This is a bit badly timed, but you also saw it over on the Vekoma or Arrow, where this train here is leaving as this train is arriving. So that's the rolling station. Stacking is where your train that's in the station is not quite ready to leave, might be taking slightly longer to load, might be taking, it might be that you've timed it that way. So you allow the train that's approaching the station to sit and wait. Now that might be because you don't have any blocks in the middle. So you've just had the top of the lift hill, you've done a short course, and then you're ending it with a break room. And so you want the train to wait in the station until the train that's behind you has arrived at the station, so it's then safe for it to leave. And you see this actually quite commonly in real life. So, for example, Nemesis at Alton Towers, Swarm at Thorpe Park, Raptor at Gardaland, they all have stacking. They will all wait for the train that's out on the track to come back to the station before allowing the train in front to depart. That's really, really, really common. But like I say, the Eurofighters, they tend to be a bit more efficient. So that's the principles then with regarding how you build it. When you're then ready to actually set it up on your coaster panel, this is obviously incomplete, but we'll just pretend that it's a complete coaster. You come to your operations panel, you select from standard to block sectioned, and now it will tell you how many trains you're allowed on the track. So as long as this is a complete circuit, you can keep adding trains. So for this one, it would allow me, if I had the complete circuit, it would allow me to have 3, and it would place a train here, a train here, and a train here. Then I need to decide, is it efficient to have 3 trains? Because you don't want trains to be waiting where possible for this station to be clear. It's more efficient in that instance to have 1 fewer train and loading and just having it constantly as a throughput. So you have to do a little bit of mental maths. There is no golden formula that I can give you. There is no rule. You just have to play it out in real life. Is it more efficient to allow the train to stack behind, or is it more efficient to run fewer trains? You just need to play that out. But then when you are ready, you need to start working out the timings. So if you've got your timings about right, the time that it's going to take the train to leave the station here, up the lift hill, around your course, and to the end of the first brake run before your station should be about 30 to 45 seconds. Knowing full well that your train is allowed to leave and enter the lift hill after the train in front has left the lift hill, you don't have to set your intervals to be 45 seconds. You could probably set them to be about 28 seconds. So if I come back over to the Vekoma, I think that's what I've done. 24 seconds. So even though the ride duration itself is about a minute, I'm saying that a train is able to leave the station every 24 seconds. And that means then that this station is clear, ready for this train that's coming back in to actually arrive. And it's just that complete continuous flow. So I also have the options here to set my minimum and my maximum departure times. And I get quite often asked why these are an actual thing. So the minimum length of time is so that you can set how long the train has to wait before it goes. Now be careful when you're using the minimum and the minimum departure time, because if your minimum is set to higher than your departure time, then it's going to wait for the minimum and not your departure interval. So I like to turn the minimum off, because the minimum then becomes 24 seconds. It has to wait for 24 seconds. And then the maximum, I like to set at around about 60 seconds. So you don't really want a train to wait in a station willy-nilly for guests to ride. So you want that train to leave every minute so that the train behind it can offload and let the guests carry on with their day. The last thing you want to do is to kill your excitement and your rating of your coaster because you've allowed the train to stack and the guests are getting bored on the brake run. So I set my maximum to about 60 seconds. And then once that's all set up, I can just let the game play through, and then if I need to add more trains, then I can add more trains. I just close the entire ride, add more trains, retest it, and off you go. You can normally get a really good feel for how this is going to pan out in life by testing the ride. So if I were to just close this Eurofighter now and put it into, I'm just going to do a real quick trick that just clears the queue. There we go. And just put it back into test mode. We will now see that it should now behave exactly as it was when the actual ride was operational. So we've got the first train, it's left, it's going up the lift hill. So technically now this train is allowed to enter this section. And then it's going to go over the hill. It's going to come this way into the 0G. And this train is now perfectly timed so that this one has cleared before this one reaches the top of the lift. And you'll then see that this one's then going to come into the helix. And it's going to clear the first brake run here before this train has reached here. Actually, do you know what? It's more efficient running than it is testing. Who knew? So that's the guiding principle behind that. So that's pretty much how you set up the blocks and how you set up timings and everything. But remember, your brake runs also need decoration. So yes, it won't be any surprise to you that we're going to start introducing ThemeMaker's Toolkit stuff. But remember though, you don't have to use ThemeMaker's Toolkit to decorate your catwalks and your brake runs. You can use the in-game pieces. We've done all of that over in the maintenance area. That's the maintenance episode that you can use. But just for this one, just to talk through the principles of what you need. So you would typically find on a brake run some kind of electricity cabinet or electricity units, because they would act as circuit breakers and everything. So if something goes wrong with the ride, they can just go up and they can cut the electricity from a brake run. So it works in a similar principle, that the electrics would also be broken up into different blocks and zones. You may also find that they would have CCTV, and of course they're going to have lights. Remember your lights, because if you're operating your ride at night and you need to evacuate your trains, the last thing you want to do with a scared guest is to put them out in the open on a brake run with no assistance for visibility, because remember, it's going to be potentially pitch black. So there's nothing worse for a frightened guest than being on a brake run in the pitch black. And also remember that you're going to need some kind of exit strategy or escape strategy. So for these ones here, this is absolutely fine, because you can just walk along the brake run into the station and through. We've discussed that already when we did the station configuration episode. But remember that your mid-course brake runs that are high up, they need to have some kind of a strategy. So you either need to include some kind of stairs for the guests to get down, or you need to have a platform for them to wait on whilst you've got a cherry picker or something coming along to get them down. So you don't have to have stairs. It's absolutely advisable. UK legislation would suggest that you should always have your guests be able to get off the ride, so you would include stairs. But it's not an entire requirement around the world, as long as you do have an exit strategy. So you've got somewhere for a cherry picker to park, be safe, and get the guests down. Or you have stairs that lead. And then remember that any path that's leading from the area needs to be fenced off from the rest of the ride, because obviously the ride may still be operating during this evacuation. So just make sure that your guests are separated. And again, we've talked about that in previous episodes. So guys, that brings us quite nicely to the end of this episode. A nice short one. I thought you deserved a break. And there's only so much you can talk about block breaks, right? So if you have found this useful, would really appreciate you leaving a like on the video. That helps the algorithm to find us a new audience, and we're just gaining people all the time, and you guys are just awesome at everything that you support with. So thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and of course, until we speak again, you know what to do. Please keep safe, look after yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.